Hi, I'm Alva, and this short video is a guide for newly immigrated and refugee trans people. In the video, we will speak about what transsexual, transgender, trans, and other terms mean, how you as a trans person are protected by law in Germany, how you can deal with discrimination that you might face, how to change your first name and your gender marker, what options you have for adapting your body to your gender, where you can find support and help, and also where you can meet other trans people. Trans definitions and other important definitions. It's entirely up to you how you define yourself. It may be that one of the following terms feels appropriate for you, but it doesn't have to be. First term we would like to talk about is transgender or transsexual. When a child is born, the decision is usually made for them on the basis of certain sexual organs, the vagina or the penis, whether the child should grow up as a girl or a boy. Many trans people realize, even as children, that this doesn't feel completely right for them. And if a person decides that they no longer want to live in the gender that they were assigned at birth, there are various other ways to live as a member of another gender. We explain these options in this short guide, and people who want to live in a different gender than the one that they were assigned at birth often define themselves as transgender or transsexual. So a trans woman is a person who was assigned male at birth, who was defined as a boy at birth, but knows that they are a woman, feels like a woman, and now lives as a woman. And a trans man is a person who was designated female at birth, who was defined as a girl, but knows that they are, in fact, a man, a boy, and now live as a man. In many societies, there's the idea that there are only two genders, men and women. But in fact, there are many more than two genders. And there are people who don't clearly or exclusively define themselves as men or women. They would be considered non-binary. People who do not clearly or exclusively define themselves as men or women might define themselves as neither male nor female. They might see themselves as male as well as female. They could describe themselves as in between genders. They might associate with any gender or without gender. When transgender people make social and sometimes medical changes to align themselves with their true gender, we call that a transition. There are various ways of adapting to your gender. For example, you could choose a new first name that suits you well and tell other people about it. You could also have your first name and your gender marker officially changed in your passport and your documents. Your passport will then show the name and gender that you identify with. You have the option of changing your appearance to match your actual gender, and some transgender people may want to start hormone replacement treatment to adjust their body through surgery or to wear different clothing, hairstyles, or makeup. In this guide, we explain the different options available to you and how you can implement them, with some steps that you can take that are up to each person to decide for themselves. You don't have to take hormones or have any surgery to be yourself or to be truly trans. You decide for yourself what feels good to you. Most people want to be recognized as the gender in which they feel comfortable. In other words, if you feel that you are a man, you probably want other people to see you and address you as a man in the way that feels fitting for you. You want to pass well. Hormone treatment and sometimes surgery can be helpful ways to achieve that, but they are not necessary. Wearing the appropriate clothing also has a strong effect on how well you pass and how others see you. You can see if you're satisfied with the way that you pass and what steps you might like to take to change the way that you pass. There are two types of coming out to yourself and coming out to others. When you become aware that your gender identity doesn't match the gender that you were assigned at birth, this is called an inner coming out, because you are coming out to yourself. Coming out to yourself can take a long time, and it doesn't happen from one day to the next. If you then decide to tell your family, your friends, or other people about it, that is called an external coming out. There are many people who don't come out to others, or only tell very few people about it, especially if being trans is not allowed in their country. You don't have to tell anyone about your feelings, you don't have to tell anyone that you are trans, but it sometimes helps to open up to certain people to exchange ideas or to ask for advice. Pronouns are elements of language that refer to people and that give an indication of their gender. In German, for example, these are er, ihm, he or him, and sie, ihr, so she or her. If you decide to live openly as the gender you identify with, you probably want other people to address you in this way as well. Most trans people choose their pronouns accordingly. So a lot of trans women choose the pronoun she, and a lot of trans men choose the pronoun he. For people who are neither women nor men, for instance, people who are non-binary, there is unfortunately no official pronoun in the German language. Non-binary people therefore often have to find other solutions and develop their own pronouns for themselves, such as they, or sie, he, hers, or a and er, or in English, or in German they might say er, sie, or nin. Some also use their first name instead of a pronoun. It can be very hurtful if a trans person tells you how to address them and you still deliberately use the wrong pronoun to speak to them. We can't know what gender people are from looking at them. That's why it's good to ask people about their pronouns. The term queer is often used as a collective term for people whose gender or sexuality doesn't conform to social expectations. For example, queer can be defined as people who don't classify themselves as either men or women, but who don't find the term trans to be fitting for them. People of different sexual orientations can also be found under this term. And your gender identity is the way that you feel or identify in terms of your gender, how you relate to yourself and the world. You might define yourself as a man, as a woman, or as a non-binary person. Gender identity is what you feel on the inside and what you know to be true about yourself. It can develop independently of how you represent yourself to the outside world. Sexual orientation describes who you are attracted to. This can be attraction on a romantic or a sexual level, or both. Your sexual orientation and your gender identity are independent of each other. So you could choose to live as a man after you transition, and if you have previously loved or desired men, you can still do so as a trans man. Or vice versa, if you loved and desired women before, you can still do so after transition. Whether you're gay, lesbian, bisexual, straight, or something else has nothing to do with your gender. Your sexual orientation does not have to change after your transition. It can change. Both are perfectly fine. Gender roles are shaped by the society that you live in. This means, for example, that a society might expect a boy to play with cars and a girl to play with dolls. Even though this has already changed in many areas in Germany today, it still often happens that certain interests or characteristics are attributed to one gender more than another. These often have to be fulfilled by an individual in order to be accepted by society. Gender itself, as well as gender roles, are shaped by society. Children first learn that their gender must be exactly the same as that which they were assigned by doctors at the time of their birth. However, people can be different and behave differently than they are expected to. So the fact that a child is born with a penis doesn't mean that they have to live as a boy, but rather that they can decide in the course of their own life whether they want to live as a man, as a woman, or as a non-binary person, and how they want to express their gender. If a person, for instance, cannot be clearly classified as a boy or as a girl at birth by medical standards because they don't have the typical sexual characteristics but are in between sexes, we speak of intersex. For example, a child could be born with a vagina and testicles that are lying inside the body. Some intersex people don't know until puberty that their body doesn't develop the way that other children's bodies do. For example, when a girl might develop beard growth in puberty. People can also be intersex without even knowing about it. Like anyone else, an intersex person can experience and define themselves as a man, a woman, or as non-binary. Many intersex people are subjected to surgery in early childhood without their consent to create a clearly female or clearly male sexual characteristic. This guide is not specifically aimed at intersex people, however, some topics might be relevant to you, and of course you can also contact any of the counselling centres if you have further questions. Discrimination means that a person is treated differently or worse than other people, for example because of the colour of their skin or because of their gender. In Germany, being a trans person, you are protected by law against discrimination. The Grundgesetz is the German constitution, so the constitution of the Federal Republic of Germany, and it's the most important and the highest law in the country. The Grundgesetz says that the state may not discriminate against anyone or give preference to anyone because of their gender or their origin. In addition, the German Equality Act, Allgemeines Gleichbehandlungsgesetz, also applies. It prohibits discrimination against people based on the following grounds: religion or belief, disability or chronic illness, age, origin or skin color, gender, sexual orientation or identity. There are different reasons why people are discriminated against by others. For us, the points of origin and skin color and of gender are particularly important for this guide, because the law says that people must be treated equally, regardless of whether they may, for example, come from Germany, from Afghanistan, Bulgaria, China, or any other country. Likewise, trans people must not be treated differently or worse than other people. The Equality Act applies above all in working life and in other areas of everyday life. For example, it states that a Muslim woman may not be turned away in a job interview because she is wearing a headscarf. It's also forbidden to refuse to rent an apartment to people because of their origin, or for instance, to not serve someone in a restaurant because he or she is trans. The term transphobia refers to prejudices, negative attitudes, or aggression towards trans people. Although the anti-discrimination laws apply in Germany, transphobic discrimination and harassment also occur. Unfortunately, there are many people in Germany for whom transsexuality or transgender people are not normal. A study from 2012 showed that 73% of trans men and 85% of trans women have been discriminated against in the past 5 years. There are various forms of discrimination against trans people. These include insults, the repeated and deliberate use of the wrong pronouns, so-called misgendering, but also invasive questions about intimate details of their lives, as well as sexual assault and other forms of violence. The procedures that people have to go through to get approval for hormone therapy or to get a first name change, for example, can also be very stressful for people affected. These procedures take a long time and they cost money. You are not alone. There are plenty of ways to get help. If you are affected by discrimination, there are different ways to deal with it. You can try to find a way to deal with it yourself. If something discriminatory is said to you, you can try to ignore it or turn a blind eye. If you know there are certain places where you aren't treated well, you may well try to avoid them. You can also look for an environment where you feel comfortable and where you can be accepted just the way that you are. For example, those could be your friends or relatives. For other people, These might be support groups or other groups specifically of trans people. That could be a safe space for you. There are people who have similar experiences to yours and who you can talk to about your problems. Those in other environments can offer you help and support, but there are also specific counselling centres that you can turn to if you've been subjected to violence. So far, we've briefly explained which steps a transition may involve, and in the next part of the video, we will describe the possible steps in more detail. However, this doesn't mean that it always has to go this way. Sometimes the procedures may take longer, or there might be obstacles or problems that come up as you transition. Unfortunately, we can't explain every possible step of the transition in detail here. It's really advisable that you get some personalized support to accompany you during your transition. This is possible at counselling centres, which can explain everything in detail to you, and there are also people who can accompany you emotionally on your way, and that can be very helpful. In Germany, there is the so-called Transsexuellengesetz, TSG, the Transsexual Act, and it has been in force since 1980. This law gives trans people the opportunity to legally change their name and gender marker to the appropriate gender. This law also applies to you as a refugee, if you are stateless in Germany, if you have your residence in Germany as an asylum seeker, or if there are no regulations such as the Transsexual Act in your country of origin and you have an unlimited right of residence or a renewable residency permit and are regularly and permanently a resident in Germany. If you've not yet completed your asylum procedure or if you've been rejected, you will unfortunately have to wait until you've been granted residency permit in a new procedure. However, you can already start with your first steps during this waiting period, for instance, going to a counselling centre or finding a therapist. The law mainly regulates that and how you can change your first name and your gender status, your gender entry in your papers. So that you can do this, you must fulfill the following requirements according to paragraph 1 in the Transsexual Act. First, you must have felt that you belong to the opposite gender for at least 3 years and have a strong inner need to live in that gender. Second, you must be sure that it is highly probable that your affiliation to the opposite gender will not change. The court will check whether you fulfill all these conditions. For the purpose of the court commission, you need 2 expert opinions. This is criticized by many trans people. You can suggest experts to the court. For recommendations on experts, it's best to contact a local support group. The experts will talk to you and write an expert opinion with their assessment of your trans identity, which the court will then receive. And the court then decides whether your first name and your gender status may be changed. You also have the option of changing your first name only and changing your gender marker later or not at all. But if you want to change both, it's most convenient to request both changes at the same time. For assistance, support, and more detailed information on all of the procedures we've mentioned, please contact one of the trans counselling centres or self-help groups. They can also help you. It's possible that the Transsexual Act will soon be amended or changed. New regulations should make it much easier for trans people to get their name and their gender entry changed. For information on the current developments, it's best to contact a counselling centre or a self-help group, and they will inform you about everything that's been happening. Since the end of 2018, there has been a new gender marker available in Germany, divers in German, in addition to the gender entries male or female. However, this option is not open to all people. It's primarily open to intersex people. For the gender entry diverse, you currently need a certificate from a doctor stating that you have a variation of gender development, but this could change soon. The good news is that without an expert opinion or similar, you can get what's referred to as an Ergänzungsausweis, a complementary ID, from the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Transidentität und Intersexualität, DGTI. This contains the name, gender, and pronouns you have chosen for yourself. This identity card is a support in everyday life, but it is not an official identification document. The website of the DGTI is unfortunately only available in German. For more information how to get this card and how to use it, you can, however, ask support groups for some help translating and contacting DGTI to fill out any forms required. The adaptation of your body to your actual gender and your first name and marital status changes do not depend on each other. You can decide for yourself if you want to go all these different paths or not. If you only want to do hormone replacement treatment without changing your official gender, that's perfectly fine. On the other hand, if you want to change your gender marker in your passport documents or also change your name, no one will then force you to have any form of surgery. There are different options for undergoing physical transition or seeking medical assistance during your transition. For trans men, these include hormone treatment, so usually taking testosterone. They include a mastectomy, the removal of breast tissue, the removal of the uterus, ovaries, and fallopian tubes, and may also include the surgical construction of a penis. For trans women, medical procedures in terms of transition include hormone treatment, usually with estrogen, the construction of breast tissue through implants, the removal of testicles and penis, the surgical building of a vagina, laryngeal reduction and surgical voice adaptation, face feminization surgery, the removal of facial hair by means of lasers or needles, and hair transplants in general. In addition, trans women, and really any trans person, can change their voice during voice training. Even people who are neither men nor women can request these measures for themselves. They can get them approved, but it's often more difficult for them than it is for trans women and trans men. It's best to get solid advice and support. Many of these measures can be paid for by a health insurance company. If you have a residency permit, you are covered by state health insurance. This means that the same costs are covered for you as they are for German citizens. If your asylum procedure has not yet been completed, or your asylum application has been rejected, unfortunately, you only have limited access to medical care. It is therefore possible that hormone treatment will not be financed. In many cases, hormone treatment is approved for people without full insurance cover. If you have problems, you should contact a counseling center that can help you. Support groups can also help you with a lot of your questions. The costs for psychotherapy in connection with transsexuality or trans identity are covered by health insurance. Psychotherapy can also help you on your way and is a very important basis for transition. Therapists can also write you a report that helps you seek gender reassignment surgeries that are paid for by the health insurance companies. If you already know that you want this, you should ask the therapist at the beginning of your therapy. Under certain conditions, many of the gender reassignment surgeries we've listed above can be covered by your health insurance. Unfortunately, operations that are described by the health insurance as purely cosmetic, especially face feminization, larynx reduction, and hair transplantation, are not financed by health insurance. Whether breast reduction is paid for depends on how large your breasts have become as a result of hormone treatment. In order for your health insurance to pay for gender reassignment surgery, you must meet several requirements. You must have been taking hormones for at least 6 to 12 months. You must have been accessing psychiatric or psychological support for at least 18 to 24 months, and you must have been living in your true gender for 12 to 18 months. This is called the Everyday Life Test. The therapist then writes a detailed statement about this, known as an indication report, Indikationsschreiben. This document is sent to the health insurance company together with all of your other documents, and a competent body, the Medical Service of Health Insurance Funds, MDK, usually issues a report about their expert opinion on whether these measures should be paid for by your health insurance or not. The health insurance companies then decide on the basis of this appraisal what they will do in your case. It's essential that you seek assistance from a counseling center to get support early on. There you will find important information and support and self-help groups can also be a huge help with the many questions you probably have. Thank you for watching this video. You can find any further information and ways to contact us directly in many languages in the link in the video description.